Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Mesa International Film Festival podcast. When audience watch a movie, they see actors, they see directors, they see stunning visuals and unforgettable moments. What they rarely see is a person behind the scenes making sure the entire production actually happens. This person balancing creativity, budget, schedules, logistics, and personalities and crises all at the same time. That is a definition of a producer. And on today's episode, we have two great people. One I had a chance to work with. The other one I heard marvelous things about. Barbara and Randy, welcome to the program. How are you all doing?
Thank you. We're doing great. A little busy, but doing great.
Oh, I'm John Martinez, and I'm Natasha Kenney. Sorry, we're the hosts of the Mesa International Film Festival podcast. So we'll just jump right into it. Let's start at the very beginning. How did you guys get into filmmaking?
I should probably start with Randy because he's the one that got me going, and I'll let him start with his background and then how I got involved.
Well, mine started so many years ago. Most people who are going to be listening to this weren't even alive. Mine started as a love for acting when I was in school. And after seeing it turned into, I was so enamored by the filmmaking process of that film that I just absorbed myself in books on how it was made and basically realized that the whole process of making a film is a magic trick. And because I was interested in it anyway, in the field of acting with plays, I just decided that I would just, it kind of shifted me a little bit into actually wanting to making movies as opposed to being in them. Problem is, back in the 70s and in the early 80s, everything's still done on film. So unless you have somebody that's behind you in the Hollywood system, it was almost cost prohibitive to ever even dream about doing it, because just to shoot on film at 24 single frames every second and the amount of footage it would need just to do a few takes, would probably be your entire digital budget, today's money. So it never really materialized. So as a result of my frustration of not being able to actually get any financing, I basically just spent years and years and years and years learning the entire process of how a movie is made, from the ground up: development, screenwriting, production, directing, production design, costume design, everything. So I would have a basic understanding of everybody's process. So at least if I ever got the chance to be in that situation where I could talk to somebody who could actually make this happen, I'd actually be able to speak knowledgeably about it. The problem was, like so many other people in this business, is I didn't really worry about the business end, which is a big mistake. Once you realize how to make a film, you really got to start learning the legalities of how all this works to keep yourself out of trouble. So I started making short films in the early 2000s, and I got to my second one after I met Barb. She asked if she could, assist. Recognizing her background, I said, yeah. I said, would you like to produce? And she responded, well, do you think I can produce? I said, you teach 8th graders with special needs. You're perfect for the film business.
That's kind of how it started. So on a short film, I was still living out of town. I was up in Missouri and he's down here in Arizona. It's really hard to help with a production when you're that many miles away. So the weekends I would fly down here, we would put together, we'd help produce, get the things needed to make a short film. And that's when I started. So 2008 was when we collaborated closely. He had already done a film in 2006, but in 2008 we did our first short film and filmed out at Four Peaks. And so the producing side of that was really difficult. You only have so many hours on a weekend, then you're flying back home. So I moved down here in 2012, and because I thought, oh boy, I'm here now, we can really make a lot of movies. And then I found out you don't find the money.
The money thing got in the way again.
Yeah. So you're finding out like you're either taking it out of your pocket to produce a film, or you don't do anything, because we just didn't know. I didn't know anybody, except I had a few family members down here. Randy had a full-time job. So it's really hard to get movie making going until you're in a situation where you're very flush with money, you know somebody, or you're retired and you can put some effort into all of this. So That's kind of how it started. And then 2012, we put our production company together, Spinning Reels Productions, and did the LLC and thought, good, now everything's going to start. So that's the beginning.
Ultimately, we ended up in a position by which we had to self-finance our first film. And now at least, which was okay, because when you finally get past the process of making the movie, then you start worrying about, okay, how am I going to get a distribution deal? And you start working with distributors, and you start working with returns and spreadsheets and monthly, quarterly payouts, that kind of thing. That teaches you a lot, because now you can go into a business meeting with an investor and really speak intelligently about how they are going to get their money back, because we know how we're getting our money back.
So that's kind of the start of how we got together and started the company. And it's still been bumpy, but you get on set, and I think Natasha found this out. You get on set and all of a sudden you find out you really like it and you want to be back on another set. No matter what you have to do, you will be picking up trash. If it means you can get back on another set, you either love it or hate it.
Well, you hate it when you're doing it.
Some of it, yeah.
Most of the time.
It's not there.
Right.
Yeah. And then you get the movie out there and you show it to somebody, and that's really what really compels you to do another project, is the way people respond to it. And then, then you become sadistic and you throw yourself into the project.
Yeah, it's a love or hate, but boy, it's so intoxicating to get on a set. But producing on a set is what a lot of people don't know how hard it is. Pre-production. John, the pre-production side. I worked with somebody one time that thought you could do pre-production in 2 weeks, and you could write, which he was writing on that production, a feature film, in 7 days, and then put it out there. And I'm glad you're looking like that, Natasha.
First of all, let me say that, I personally, in all due respect, that was really a first draft, and I would not have shot the first draft. But, I was a work for hire, so I did the job.
I've heard is, Barb, you were in Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
Randy's down here in Arizona. Like, how did that connection happen? Since you guys,
well, that's an online connection.
Okay.
Way back when,
awesome.
Just like film has become a digital medium, so it's a relationship.
We randomly found each other online and just started to talk. And he said he's in film, and he was a writer, and he said he did thrillers. I said, what, am I going to be your next victim?
I had to
said, there's no way.
I had to convince her, just because you write these things doesn't mean that's
you're going to act it out.
Because if everybody judged a person's personality and what they wrote, there's a lot of filmmakers nobody want to ever have anything to do with.
John, I think you're one. You got a few things going.
Yeah. So I got a question. So it's fascinating too. So let's go back to 2006. What was filmmaking like back then? Because now, with technology, you have these editing platforms where you can do wonders. And just, I do my editing and post on Premiere Pro, and every couple weeks there's another version coming out where now AI is helping. But before, on my first film, you had to do individual keystrokes, to do whatever it is you're doing. But back in 2006, that's, to me, when you go back in time, that's pure filmmaking, because you have to solve all these problems literally with your creativity. You don't have the power of AI now to do everything. But what was it like making films back in 06?
Interesting, because I don't think the process is no different. It's just, only thing, the process doesn't change. It's just the tools you have at your disposal that change, but the process still remains the same. You're just going to have more tools to facilitate whatever issues you're going to have in the process.
So it was a short Western that he did, and he was able to get the Western costumes from the person at the studio.
A short project we did through Old Tucson. And at first they thought we were a student film. And then when I went in to actually talk to the people there at Old Tucson, I found out that we weren't actually a student film, but I think the passion that I had kind of won over the people there, and they kind of granted me a lot of, leeway that they might not ordinarily grant an individual filmmaker, knowing that I didn't have a lot of money. I was just trying to get off the ground. So they brought me to a lot of different people that helped with the project for little or no money, which was great because most of the project, came out well. The problem is I learned an immense amount about how important casting is. And I thought I could write for somebody's personality, but you hand that to a person and tell them to be themselves, and that's the worst direction you can give somebody.
Or don't hire your friends.
Because most people are not self-aware enough to even know what that direction even means. A lot of people that are new to the process, people think the word acting is really just imagining that whatever's happening to you is a real event. And people who use it, think that they have to act are really over dramatizing or overemphasizing whatever the point is, especially, in motion pictures, because you got a camera not 4 feet away from you. So every little nuance that you make with your face shows up on this huge screen, hopefully if you're showing it in theater, or even on today's 80-inch television sets. It comes across, extreme. And so you have to know that as a director yourself, that, the less is more, basically.
Yeah.
Is to don't over exaggerate or overemphasize things, because it's going to play huge.
And
you see Jack Nicholson raise his eyebrow, and that says a lot.
And that's the thing too. I think a lot of actors, as they go, is to realize the power of the lens. If you're using a 25 millimeter lens, you're getting this, but once you get that 75, like you said, the minute your mouth goes up a little bit, changes everything. But yeah, I mean, that's something, like you said, and just hearing your struggles, you give me like cold sweats and flashbacks of just what people don't know. But the one thing too, like and this is one thing, like when I started filmmaking too, Randy, like yourself, I didn't go to film school, but I did educate myself on how to be a filmmaker before I jumped in, is to understand those nuances. But the one thing I think now, which is great for platforms like YouTube and everything else that's out there, is that for people who say, hey, I want to try filmmaking, how do I go about it? And you go to YouTube, to kind of see, like, what would you tell a young filmmaker who's ready to grab his camera, hit record? What would you tell a young filmmaker? And same thing, Barbara, too, like before you hit record, what would you tell them to start preparing for before you get to that moment?
I know that answer.
You answer first.
Remember, it's a business, and every piece of paper has to be in order. Every permit, insurance. A lot of them think they can go without insurance. They can go, oh, we'll get that later comment. It's like later doesn't work. So a new filmmaker better know how the importance of insurance and all the paperwork being in order. Permits, I talked to you about that, John, a lot. They can shut you down real quick. And Natasha, I think I told you the story about the police came to where we were filming, knocked on the door because there was a complaint by neighbor. Now, I knew everything was in order. I called the police. I called the film commissioner. They all knew. And so the permits they protected us. I had the police see the permits. They were signed by that film commissioner. They were set so we could film on the street. All of that was in order, and the police said, oh, okay, you're fine. So a new filmmaker needs to know the importance of pre-production and what's in order. So you'd lose money if they came on set and said, sorry, I have to shut you down. To me, that was my biggest nightmare, that somebody was going to walk in and say, this isn't right, you're done. Because we were self-financing that feature, so that was a lot different. So, but his answer for filmmakers is different because he's coming from the filmmaker side. I'm coming from being a business, paperwork, everything in order person.
Well, like most filmmakers, I'm going to make this a visual thing. Before you can sell a piece of bread, you have to know how to bake it. So all that business stuff is cool, but until you actually know how to make something you can sell, it's really not going to be relevant. The thing is the two most important things about filmmaking that I believe are important is learn how to write, because you have to understand the story.
A good
because
script.
Without a good story, you're just filming a bunch of random events that are like a bunch of colliding atoms that are going to go off into wherever. The other thing is learn composition with still cameras, because you can learn filters, you can learn lenses, you can learn composition, you can learn the rule of thirds, you can learn a lot of things with an individual camera, even with your phone, that doesn't cost a lot of money, that are going to save you a lot of time. You can learn all the basic tools you need. And then once you understand the writing process and all the composition in lenses, in depth of field and things like that, then you marry the two. Then you start dealing with actors, and then you got a whole new set of problems.
Sorry, I had to laugh at that one too. It's like, whoa, they're the actors, but we love them because that helps our film. But yeah, the marriage between us on that is like, I do the paperwork, I get everything ready to go to do what he needs for when he's on set. Because if he says, "Where's this? Why isn't this here? What's wrong with this location? It isn't what I said," you lose. So yes, you have to have a marriage between the producer and especially the director. The writer's already sent his work in. You know, they're not always the director. So you have to make sure you understand the writer's take and then go for it from the director point of view.
Unfortunately for writers, as soon as you turn in the writing, they no longer need you. And, and so people
own it.
People have a tendency to dismiss writers, but the writer is really your slab to build a house on.
See, I thought they dismissed producers, but they really dismissed the writer a little bit more.
Yeah. So
it's sad. But once they own your property, once that company owns your property, they can do whatever they want to your script. And I've heard rewrites have really manipulated a lot of scripts too. So, I had to remind Randy one time when he sold a script to this person, it's like they own it. He goes, but they're not doing this, or they really took this out of context. And I said, yeah, I'm sorry, but they own it. And I think it's hard when you have ownership of what you wrote and you give it up.
When you work for hire, you're creating for somebody else, and it's never going to be,
your vision. It's their vision.
It's going to be their vision,
right? And that is difficult.
They can change it however they want, but that's a whole new.
That's that different conversation.
To basically put it in a nutshell, to answer your question, focus on writing, focus on composition and camera work,
and get a good cast,
which you can do, and then basically you just go out there and start shooting something. I mean, if your intention is to learn and not to sell, because it should be to learn and not to sell initially, because you don't want to be trying to learn with somebody else's money. It just go out with a bunch of friends and shoot something. That'll teach you a lot about acting.
The new filmmaker, every film you learn something. I don't care how many you've done, you're going to learn something.
And that's true all the way up to and including Steven Spielberg. If you ever feel like you know everything, you better find something else to do. And that's true with whatever you're doing.
Correct.
If you feel like you know everything, you're setting up to crash. You're going to, arrogance and ego and things get in the way. And those are never good combinations, especially in a creative environment.
I love that you guys are both on, because so many times in the industry, what I find is people don't really know what the job of the filmmaker is, or the job of the director, and they'll go up and ask the director questions when they really should be going to the first AD or producer. And I'm so glad, Barb, we have you on, because you're so knowledgeable about the producing side and the business side, that as creatives, and I'm sure I don't mean to speak for John, but just stuff you wouldn't even think about.
Right.
You're like, hey, you can't. I remember the first time I met you, I wore my flip-flops, and you cannot be here. And I'm like,
no, I said, you cannot have open-toed shoes on set, and it's a safety thing, and it's for both of us.
And so it was just you know what? But in hindsight, it's you don't think of stuff like that.
No, exactly.
And so I love hearing your story, and what's got to be, and I know you guys are going to give two different answers, but what's got to be the most frustrating part of doing what you do Randy as a creative, as a director, as a filmmaker, and then Barb on the business side.
Okay. The interesting thing is the easiest part of the process, and I don't mean it's easy to do, I mean the easiest part of the process is writing, because you don't have to worry about anybody else. You don't have to spend any money. Words don't cost anything. But then at the same time, they don't cost anything to cut either. The madness begins once you finish this thing and then you decide you're going to take it from your laptop or whatever you're writing on and take it out into the world and actually create something from that 120 pages or 90 pages or whatever it is you have. Then the madness starts. And, and it's in that for years I had to convince Barb that, things are going to happen inevitably. Law of probability. Anytime you have, the more things you have involved in anything, the more that starts to domino and you're going to have all kinds of issues. But prepping for something as well as you possibly can allows you to pivot when you run into those problems, because then you're not focusing on, okay, well, how did I, imagine I was going to do this before I ran into this problem. You already know how you're going to do it before you run into the problem. You just have to get around the hurdle now. And they're inevitably going to run into those hurdles, whatever they may be. You never know what they're going to be. Anything from losing a location to having an actor
have to leave early,
or even to some extreme extent die on you.
Yeah.
And then you have to reshoot their entire, scenes. And everybody who's in the shot with them has to be called back. Which that's a nightmare scenario, but there's always going to be something that happens. You just have to be ready to go. It's like, I'm an ex-veteran. I'm a veteran, Air Force veteran. And that's probably, I don't recommend, you have to be in the military in order to be a filmmaker, but man, did that experience prepare me to do this, because you're basically running an army.
Yeah, and something too, Randy, on that note, and I think you and Barb will probably agree, like pre-production in my mind is like the calm before the storm. It's like you prepare for everything you possibly can. And of course, when you get there, you're going to be like, I forgot this. But now we're in production, and this where I say it's Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law is it's not a bad thing. A lot of people confuse Murphy's Law with a bad thing. It's just that whatever can happen will happen. And as soon as I get on set, I'm like, Murphy's Law is around. Just get ready to pivot, get ready to do something different, because in your mind, I'm sure like the rest, that people out there direct, you already played this movie in your head like 900 times. And then you get on set and you're like, okay, the light's not working the way I had this envisioned. And now you have to pivot. What is your mindset? And same thing, Barb, for you, because again, pre-production, there's no real pressure per se. It's just lining up the crew. And that's something else I want to talk to you about. But like, you get the actors, and then just as important in front of the camera as those behind the camera, because if you can't have that communication, which is the biggest thing going back to the military, is just how well you can communicate to everyone to put them in there. But now you realize you're just dealing with two sides, and then there's the producer side. So as a director, you're kind of now dealing with this blender of activity of like working with the actors to make sure that they're delivering their lines the way you envision it, and making sure the crew is capturing it how you see it. So in post-production it works, and then the producer saying, hey, we have 15 shots today, you're on 4, we need to go, and it's just going on. But how does your mind change from pre-production to today or tomorrow is day one, we're going to film? Like what's going through your mind on that for that first day of production?
Right. I need to go back to pre-production, because you were saying it's kind of like calm.
It's never calm. Not there.
There are so many things that pop up. It'd be like I had the helicopter all ready to go, and the guy said, let's wait till we're a little bit closer to production. We'll finalize everything, because I wanted to go see their me. And I'm like, this is like, we're going to film in September. This is late July, and I'm not hearing back, and it's getting closer. And I finally put this text that said, do you not work for the company anymore? I'm not hearing from you. So I had another pilot at that same company. I contacted him and I said, I don't know what's going on. I can't get this guy. We need to get this settled. I need a helicopter in place. And he said, oh, by the way, the guy died. I was like,
That's why we weren't getting a response back from him.
and I thought, I sent that last email that said, what do you know, don't you work for the, he was the owner of the company. He died. And this pilot was taking over what happened. And of course, everything worked out great. But things like that happen. And you're wondering, why aren't you calling me? The Forest Service guy said, I can't get the lady to sign your permit because there's a forest fire in a different area of Arizona. And so I'm like, how am I going to get the, it's coming down to the wire. I'm 3 weeks out. I can't find another forest. I'm in Arizona. If I can't get the person in charge to sign, I'm like, so to me, pre-production isn't calm.
So pre-production is just trying to beat the deadline on your schedule.
Because you want everything in place. And you said something about, what about the first day? I have the first week. I'm going on to the second week. He's doing the first day. Okay, now something's going on the first day. Now I'm backing up because somebody else is saying, where are we going to park on the fourth day? Because they have to put it in the call sheet. And I'm like, parking. Now I panic and go, parking. Yeah, I got that. I'm, but he's saying, okay, first day we have this. I said, no, that's there. I got it. So for me, pre-production, you could lose all your hair, during pre-production, just to make sure it's lined up, because your job is to make sure everything is in place for a smooth, not only first day, but first week,
and
first.
And that's the thing that, I was going to say, Randy, one thing I noticed, not to interrupt you, but what Barb was saying was with pre-production, I think what people don't realize, to get a film permit could take a day, 2 weeks. It could take, on the one of the short I made, to get to Arizona State Land to give me a permit, took 4 months. It was literally like a 10-second shot.
And I think Secretary of State,
yeah,
I had to get a permit from him.
If you're dealing with the United States government, you better give yourself 6 months.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We have friends still trying to get a permit for the last couple of years for a film they're doing.
And I think too, with filmmakers, some of them kind of go about means to get it done. But I know with the Phoenix Film Commission here, they're super helpful. I mean, they go, like with my experience, they have going above and beyond. And I think a lot of filmmakers don't realize that, but go look them up on the digital media site on the state, and those people are super helpful. I think they don't do that enough. And like you said, it's in pre-production, like what I mean is the comments, there's nothing less, like Randy says, you got your schedule saying, I have everyone on September 1st. It's not as bad, because once September 1st comes, then, as I like to say, the bankroll's rolling, like you are start paying people, which is to me more stressful in that, did you calculate the right scene with the right number of shots? And everything else is craft services there, what a lot of people don't realize,
No, that's really important. You bet.
Yeah. So actually, that was the one thing that, I notice is that it helps you get ready. But I know it's like my mindset is different, because it's almost like Randy said, it's like you're in preparation mode in pre, and then like you're in combat mode, not to be so dramatic. But now it's like, it's like an operation. You have to get so many scenes done. If not, you fall behind. And like a lot of us, it's coming out of our pockets. And even if it isn't coming out of your pockets, you have investors, God forbid you go over budget, that someone that said, look, we only have X number. Now you've made a commitment to them to get their money to make this, and goes over. So to me, when you get to production that first day, you kind of go, man, I really hope this all works at the end.
Well, in pre-production, my job is to get everything done, so when we're ready to go on that first day, that director doesn't have to think of anything but his actors and what he needs to get for that day's production. He never should have to turn to me and say, that's my thing. Just have it ready for him.
Something that I've learned, and I kind of use it also in casting, is don't put yourself in a box, because so many forces are conspiring against whatever that vision is, that you gotta be flexible enough to change it. And let's face it, if I gotta change, the composition of a shot a little bit, nobody's sitting in the movie theater saying, if you would have composed it like this, it would have been better. If they're into the story, they're into the story. It doesn't matter. They're following it no matter what you're giving them. And the same thing I found for me is also works very well in casting. And let me explain. If you're getting ready to meet somebody you've never met before, you've always got this preconceived idea in your head what they look like, much like a filmmaker would do with an actor. I got a preconceived idea in my head what they'll look like. But what that does is traps you a little bit, because now you can't see past that look. So what I do is I don't even get a look in my head. I let somebody come in and become that person. Oh, that's the person I've been looking to meet. That's the character. Now you know what the character looks like because they have presented themselves. And you never know what somebody's going to bring to you. You've got to allow yourself to be open enough that when those situations confront you, you can pivot and move. And a lot of times you end up with something better than whatever you had in mind anyway.
I love it. And so not to pivot a little bit, but I gotta say, the other night I was flipping through Amazon and I came across Dark Side of Night. I watched it.
Oh, good.
Tell me about Dark Side of Night. What inspired it? How did that come about?
Well, the original inspiration for that was a title from Barb. We were working on someone else's project, and I was concerned, and it's a script that I had written, and I was concerned that the title was so generic, and we won't go into that, but the title was so generic that I was afraid that when you look it up, you're going to get the phone book. It's going to get lost, especially with algorithms being the way they are, when you've got previous titles that have been out there for years. So when someone looks up your brand new title, it's not going to hit. They're not going to find it. So I suggested the title be changed, so much so that...
No, the director asked for a different title.
I suggested the title be changed with the investors, and through the process, they decided to change the title. Then the director asked for suggestions.
Yep. We were sitting around in a circle. There were 3 or 4 of us giving ideas.
A lot of suggestions was presented. Among those was the title Dark Side of Night, which I thought was brilliant, and it was rejected. And I said, okay, well, you know what? That's perfect. Now we have that title. Problem is, now I have to write something to it.
That is all he used.
That's all I had was a title.
Yep.
But, when you've got a title called Dark Side of Night, 2 things you know right away. The tone is dark, and you're shooting night scenes. So I know that right away. I have to write something that's going to fit. So I know it's going to be a thriller or a horror, and I know most of it's going to be shot at night. And I know the actors and crew hate doing night scenes, but when they're getting paid, you kind of, you don't have the luxury of saying, well, I would prefer we shoot in the daytime. Well, okay, go work on someone else's project then. But, so that's how the inception of the project came about. And then, of course, I've always had a problem actually writing anything until I have a name for a character. So once I decide whose story this is going to be, I'd spend days and days and days trying to find a character's name that I like before I can even start writing my story. It's like, like trying to live your life without an identity. So, I come up with the 3 main principles, this family's core unit, and then just build a story around it. And of course, then you have to have your antagonist, your protagonist, your problem, and your arcs and things of that nature. So basically, I'm just building this. So I spent probably a year and a few months just running ideas around in my head. Thing is every time an idea hits me, I text it back to myself, because no matter how hard you try to remember it, you will not remember it. You get busy with your life and say, now, what was that I was thinking of? And it's gone. So as soon as I think of something, I text it back to myself. And then after, more than a year, and I've got all these little ideas, now I've got something I can build an outline with and then start, shaping it.
That's
so.
Okay.
Well, I think right now we're just scratching the surface, but we're almost coming up on time. So the question is, are you guys, want to come back? Because there's a bunch of questions that I want to ask, and Randy kind of hit on it, but like finding the crew, what's your writing process, how to go. But are you guys available to pick it up? Because I think there's so much more to kind of jump into.
Yeah.
Be happy to.
So on that note, I just want to thank you. So today's guest is Randy and Barb. We'll drop down where you can see them. Their movie Dark Side of Night's now playing on Amazon Prime. It's on Tubi. It's on YouTube Movies. It's on Google Play. I don't think I missed anything.
Fossum's the other one.
Fossum's
Oh, okay. So it's out
Yeah.
there. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, subscribe wherever you get podcasts, leave a review, and share this episode with a filmmaker, producer, creative entrepreneur in your life. Follow us online for these episode clips, behind the scenes content, and future conversations with the people helping shape Arizona's film industry. Until next time, keep creating, keep producing, and keep telling stories. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks.